The acid rain fell in a steady, poisonous drizzle over the outskirts of megacity Kiora, turning the already filthy streets into slick chemical rivers that reflected the garish neon signs above. Broken holographic advertisements flickered across crumbling concrete walls, casting eerie blue and pink shadows down the narrow alleyways where the desperate and dangerous made their home. Laetus kept to the shadows, moving with practiced silence despite the heavy combat boots and the weight of the pulse rifle strapped across his back. 6 years as a Special Forces operative and another 3 as a mercenary had taught him how to become invisible when necessary. Tonight, it was very necessary. The Corp SEC enforcers had been on his trail since that botched job in Sector 4. Not his fault the target turned out to be connected to the board of directors. Just his bad luck. Now he was dodging security drones and trying to outrun facial recognition scanners while nursing 3 cracked ribs and a bounty large enough to make every desperate soul in the lower levels dream of early retirement. He paused at a junction, his enhanced hearing picking up the familiar whir of a security drone. Pressing himself against the slime-coated wall, he held his breath. The drone passed overhead, its searchlight briefly illuminating the grimy puddles before moving on. Laetus exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. That's when he heard it, the unmistakable sounds of a fight. Grunts of exertion, the meaty thud of fists against flesh, and an odd, high-pitched whistling that didn't sound quite human. Curiosity was a luxury he couldn't afford, but something made him turn toward the noise anyway. Perhaps it was the instinct for trouble that had kept him alive this long, or perhaps it was simple boredom. Either way, he found himself approaching the source of the commotion, hand resting on the hilt of his vibroblade. In a recessed loading bay, illuminated by a single flickering streetlight, 5 figures surrounded a 6th. The odds were unfair, but what caught Laetus' attention wasn't the numbers. It was the surrounded figure. Tall and powerfully built, with pale blue-green skin that seemed to absorb the neon lights around it. The being had to be from off-world. The pattern of raised ridges along its exposed forearms and the unmistakable double-jointed stance marked it as a Breathian, a species known for surviving on a hellscape of a world. Active volcanoes, toxic atmosphere, and predators that would give Earth's deadliest nightmares. The Abrethian was putting up one hell of a fight. As Laetus watched, it grabbed one of its attackers by the throat and slammed him into the wall with enough force to crack the concrete. But the others were closing in, and one was drawing what looked like a neural disruptor, illegal tech that could fry even an Abrethian's robust nervous system. Laetus should have walked away. Every survival instinct screamed at him to keep moving, to not get involved. This wasn't his fight. Instead, he drew his sidearm and fired 3 precise shots. The neural disruptor exploded in a shower of sparks. 2 more attackers dropped, clutching their knees where Laetus' bullets had found their mark. Fair fight seems more entertaining, he drawled, stepping into the light. The remaining gangsters exchanged glances, clearly recalculating their odds. Without a word, they grabbed their injured companions and retreated into the shadows, leaving only the Abrethian and Laetus in the loading bay. For a moment, neither moved. The Abrethian's chest heaved with exertion, golden eyes narrowed with suspicion. Blood, darker than human, with a purplish tint, trickled from a cut above one eye. I didn't need help, the Abrethian said finally, voice deep and resonant with an accent that made the words sound like stones grinding together. Clearly, Laetus replied dryly, holstering his weapon. Just adding some artistic flourish to your victory. The Abrethian snorted, a sound halfway between amusement and disdain. Those vermin were syndicate runners. Now they'll bring more. You've complicated things. Story of my life. Laetus glanced up at the security camera mounted on the corner of the building. Disabled, but for how long? Name's Laetus, and you should probably move. This area is about to get crowded with the wrong kind of audience. The Abrethian hesitated, golden eyes scanning Laetus from head to toe. Then a distant siren wailed, and decision crystallized in that alien gaze. Corsa, the Abrethian said curtly. Lead the way, human. But know that I'm watching you. Wouldn't expect anything less from an Abrethian warrior, Laetus replied, already moving toward a service tunnel entrance he'd spotted earlier. Though I'm curious what brought you to this particular shithole. Same thing that seems to have brought you, Corsa replied, falling into step beside him. The need to disappear. The service tunnel was narrow and dank, smelling of rust and rot. Emergency lights cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. Laetus led them through a maze of passages, always downward, away from the street-level scanners and into the forgotten infrastructure of Keora's underbelly. Here, he said finally, pushing open a heavy metal door that led into what had once been a storage facility. We should be safe for a few hours. The room was dusty but intact. Abandoned shipping containers created natural partitions, and there were even a few pieces of functional furniture scattered about. Laetus had used it as a bolt hole once before. Corsa entered cautiously, scanning the space with military precision. Temporary, the Abrethian stated, not a question. Very. Laetus checked the perimeter security monitor he'd rigged on his last visit. Still functional. But it buys us time to catch our breath and figure out our next moves. Corsa raised an eyebrow ridge, the expression surprisingly human on that alien face. There is no our, human. Your intervention, while unexpected, doesn't make us allies. Laetus shrugged, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his injured ribs. Suit yourself. But those syndicate thugs saw us both, and in this part of Kura, being seen together makes us connected whether we like it or not. He pulled out a small medkit from his pack and tossed it to Corsa. Clean up that cut. Antiseptics in the blue vial. Corsa caught the kit with one fluid motion but didn't immediately open it. Why would you help an Abrethian? Your kind typically avoids mine. Maybe I'm not typical, Laetus replied, settling onto a crate and finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion seeping into his bones. Or maybe I just don't like watching 5 against 1, even when the one is built like you. Silence fell between them, heavy with unasked questions. Finally, Corsa opened the medkit and began treating the cut. You move like military, the Abrethian observed. Not standard civilian. Laetus gave a humorless smile. Special Tactics Division, Earth Alliance. Former. Very former. Deserter. Corsa's tone held no judgment, merely curiosity. Honorably discharged. Then private contractor for Corp SEC. Until recently. He didn't elaborate further. You're a long way from Obrith. Corsa's expression darkened. By choice. My regiment and I had disagreements about appropriate deployment. Let me guess, Laetus said, pulling out a protein bar and breaking it in half, offering a piece to Corsa. They wanted you to fight someone you didn't think deserved fighting. The Abrethian took the offered food with a brief nod of acknowledgement. Something like that. On Obrith, we have a saying, only the strongest deserve respect, but respect must be earned, not commanded. My commanders forgot the second part. Laetus watched as Corsa took a bite of the protein bar, those alien features momentarily relaxing. There was something almost familiar in that expression, the look of a soldier who'd seen one atrocity too many. Earth has a similar concept, Laetus said quietly, though we tend to forget both parts in practice. Outside, rain continued to fall, the acid slowly eating away at the neglected infrastructure of the city. Inside, an uneasy truce formed between two beings who had only their status as outsiders in common. For now, it would have to be enough. Morning in Keora's lower levels wasn't marked by sunlight. The smog and towering arcology saw to that, but by the changing patterns of the artificial lighting and the shift rotation of the industrial zones. Laetus woke instantly, hand already on his weapon before his eyes fully opened. Corsa was already awake, seated cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation. Yet Laetus noted the slight tension in the Abrethian's posture that signaled awareness. We need to move, Laetus said without preamble. This place has served its purpose. Golden eyes opened, focusing immediately. Where? I know a place in the arcade district. Black Market Hub, no questions asked. But we'll need to cross some exposed ground to get there. Corsa stood in one fluid motion, impressive given the Abrethian's bulk. Then we move fast and stay alert. As they prepared to leave, checking weapons and gathering the few supplies they had, Laetus found himself studying his unlikely companion. In the better light, he could see the network of scars that crisscrossed Corsa's visible skin, battle wounds, but also what looked like ritualistic markings. The Abrethian caught his gaze and held it. "You stare," Corsa stated flatly. "Professional assessment," Laetus replied. "You've seen a lot of combat, as have you." Corsa gestured to Laetus's own collection of scars, particularly the distinctive burn pattern on his forearm. "Plasma discharge. Close range." Laetus unconsciously touched the scar. "Insurgents on Titan. Lost 3 squad members in that ambush. Yet you survived." There was newfound respect in Corsa's voice. Earth is considered a death world by many standards. Now I see why. The term made Laetus snort. Rich, coming from someone whose homeworld is basically one giant volcano with extra gravity. Both forged in fire, Corsa acknowledged, something almost like a smile flickering across those stern features. Perhaps that is why we still breathe when others would have fallen. The moment of connection was broken by the distant wail of security sirens. Without another word, they moved out, slipping into the service tunnels once more. The journey to the arcade district was tense. Twice they had to divert their route to avoid Corp SEC patrols. And once they froze in place as a military-grade drone swept past, its sensors probing the darkness. Laetus noticed how Corsa's breathing changed when the drone appeared. Faster, more controlled, battle-ready. Whoever was after the Abrethian had serious resources. They were crossing a waste processing plant when disaster struck. A security bot, old model but still functional, detected their presence and activated with a shrill alarm. Before Laetus could disable it, the bot had alerted the nearest patrol. "Run or fight?" Corsa asked, already drawing a wicked-looking blade from a shoulder sheath. Laetus assessed their options in an instant. "Neither. Follow me." He led them to a drainage pipe, large enough to crawl through but tight for Corsa's bulky frame. "This will take us under the security perimeter. Move fast. The sludge in there is mildly corrosive." Corsa didn't hesitate, dropping to hands and knees and entering the pipe. Laetus followed, trying not to think about the industrial waste soaking into his clothing. Behind them, the sound of boots and mechanical servos announced the arrival of the security team. The pipe was 100 meters of hell, dark, cramped, and filled with a chemical soup that burned the skin and choked the lungs. When they finally emerged on the other side, they were in a dumping ground, surrounded by mountains of technological waste and the skeletons of abandoned vehicles. Corsa hissed in pain, and Laetus saw why. The chemical sludge had eaten through part of the Abrethian's sleeve, exposing raw flesh beneath. The wound looked bad, the edges already turning an unhealthy purple. "We need to deal with that," Laetus said, gesturing to the injury. Later, Corsa growled, "Keep moving." But as they picked their way through the junkyard, Laetus could see that Corsa was slowing, the stride becoming less fluid, more pained. By the time they reached the edge of the arcade district, the Abrethian was visibly struggling. "Here," Laetus said, gesturing to a nondescript door set into the side of what had once been a luxury shopping complex. "My contact's inside. She can help with that wound." The door opened to reveal a narrow stairwell leading down. Neon signs in various languages promised everything from weapons to narcotics to body modifications. The black market of Kura operated in plain sight here, protected by bribes and the occasional disposal of overly curious authorities. Corsa leaned heavily against the wall, breathing labored. "What is this place?" "A necessary evil," Laetus replied, supporting the Abrethian's weight. "And right now, our only option." They descended into the heart of the arcade district, passing stalls selling bootleg tech and questionable medical supplies. Vendors fell silent as they passed, eyes tracking their movement. An Abrethian was rare enough to attract attention, especially one in obvious distress. Laetus guided them to a small medical booth at the far end of the market. A woman with extensive cybernetic modifications looked up from a surgical procedure, her mechanical eyes whirring as they focused. "No," she said before Laetus could speak. "Whatever it is, no." "Hello to you too, Lud," Laetus replied, helping Corsa onto a nearby bench. "I need a favor." "You used up your favors when I patched that hole in your lung last year," Lud retorted, but she was already examining Corsa's arm with professional interest. "Industrial waste exposure. Nasty. Why should I help?" "Because I'm still alive to remind you of that debt," Laetus said quietly. "And because you're curious about Abrethian physiology." Lud's cybernetic eyes clicked as she zoomed in on the wound. "Fine. But this makes us even, and I'll need something in return." "Name it," Laetus said, knowing he would regret the words. "Information," Lud replied, preparing a series of injections. "Specifically, about a certain secure server in the corporate district. I need access codes." Laetus tensed. "Those codes would be worth more than my life." "Then it's fortunate you're not just risking your life," Lud said sweetly, nodding toward Corsa. "This wound needs specialized treatment. Without it, your friend here loses the arm at best." Corsa, despite the obvious pain, fixed Lud with a steely gaze. "We are not friends, and I do not accept charity bought with extortion." "Noble," Lud commented, unimpressed. "But irrelevant. The chemical is already in your bloodstream. Treatment now, moral debates later." While Lud worked on Corsa's injury, injecting various compounds and applying a synthetic skin graft, Laetus paced the small clinic. The arcade district wasn't safe for long stays. Too many eyes, too many potential informants. And now Lud wanted server access codes. Codes that would require infiltrating one of the most secure buildings in Keora. When Corsa was stabilized, Lud pulled Laetus aside. "Your Abrethian is running from something big," she whispered. "Military-grade, transmitter embedded near the spine. Obrith Defense Force issue." Laetus glanced at Corsa, who had fallen into a healing trance, aided by Lud's drugs. "Can you disable it?" "Already did. Temporarily. But they'll know the signal went dark, which means they'll track it to its last location." Lud's mechanical eyes narrowed. "What have you gotten yourself into, Laetus?" "Nothing I can't handle," he replied automatically. "Liar," Lud said, but with a hint of affection. "The access codes. I need them within 48 hours. Then we're square." After Lud left to attend to another patient, Laetus sat beside the unconscious Abrethian, studying those alien features now relaxed in drug-induced sleep. What was he doing? His own situation was desperate enough without taking on someone else's problems. Yet something about Corsa resonated with him. Perhaps the recognition of another soul who had seen too much and chosen to walk away. Hours later, Corsa stirred, golden eyes blinking open with immediate alertness despite the sedatives. "How long?" the Abrethian asked, voice rough. 6 hours, Laetus replied. "Your arm will heal, but we have a new problem. You had a tracker. Military grade." Corsa's expression hardened. "Obrith Defense Force. They do not forgive desertion. Neither does Corpse," Laetus said dryly. "Seems we're both popular." The dim light of the clinic cast long shadows as night settled over the arcade district. In the relative privacy of Lud's back room, they finally had a moment to truly talk. "Why did you leave?" Laetus asked, offering Corsa a flask of synthetic alcohol, poor quality but effective. Corsa took a careful sip before answering. "I was ordered to lead a purge. Civilians. A settlement on Nexus 4 that refused to surrender mining rights to an Obrith consortium." The Abrethian's face darkened with the memory. "Children. They wanted me to kill children. And you refused." "I did more than refuse," Corsa said, a fierce pride flashing in those golden eyes. "I warned the settlement, helped evacuate the children before the bombardment began. Then I disappeared." Laetus nodded slowly. "Honorable. And you?" Corsa asked. "What drove you from your path?" Laetus stared into the distance, memories surfacing unbidden. "I was Corpesi C's pet killer. Special operations, deniable actions. Told myself I was maintaining order, protecting society." His laugh was bitter. "Then I discovered my targets weren't terrorists or criminals. Just people who knew too much about corporate experiments. Human experimentation. He took a long pull from the flask. My last mission, I was sent to eliminate a scientist and his research team. Dr. Karras. Brilliant man. He discovered Corp SEC was testing genetic weapons on prison populations. Before I killed him, he showed me proof. Records of thousands of deaths, covered up as processing errors. I completed the mission, but I took copies of the evidence. Been running ever since. Silence fell between them, heavy with shared understanding. Two warriors from worlds apart, both betrayed by the institutions they had served faithfully. On Oberth, Corsa said finally, "We have a saying, if you grow up fighting for your life every day, you learn to fight to the very end." Earth has similar wisdom, Laetus replied, though we tend to express it less eloquently. Their eyes met across the dimly lit room, and for the first time, Laetus saw not an alien warrior, but a kindred spirit. Corsa must have sensed the same, for the Abrethian's posture relaxed slightly. So, Corsa said, gesturing to their surroundings, "What is our next move?" The word hung between them, an acknowledgement of their new alliance, however tenuous. "We need those server access codes for Lud," Laetus said, "and I think I know where to find them." The sun never quite reached the depths of Keora's lower levels, but the artificial lighting cycle suggested it was approaching midnight when they set out. Corsa, despite the injury, moved with renewed purpose. The Abrethian had borrowed a long coat to conceal the distinctive skin color and battle scars. "The target is a data hub in Sector 7, Laetus explained as they navigated the back alleys. "Secondary backup for Corp SEC's main server. Farm. Less security than the primary site, but still formidable." "Armed response?" Corsa asked, checking the energy pistol Laetus had procured from one of Lud's associates. "Automated mostly. Drones, turrets, security bots. Human guards at the perimeter, but they rely on the tech." Laetus pulled up a schematic on his wrist display. "We go in through the cooling system. Maintenance access here has a blind spot in the surveillance grid." As they approached Sector 7, the architecture changed, sleeker, cleaner, the domain of mid-level corporate workers rather than the desperate underclass. They attracted curious glances, but kept moving, heads down. The maintenance entrance was exactly where Laetus's intel had indicated, a service door partially concealed behind waste processing units. The lock was standard corporate issue, easily bypassed with the decryption tool Laetus carried for precisely this purpose. Inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. The cooling systems for the massive data servers required constant climate control. They moved silently through maintenance tunnels, Laetus leading with practiced ease, Corsa following with a warrior's focus. "Here," Laetus whispered, stopping at a junction. "Through that grate is the secondary server room. 2 technicians on duty, predictable patrol pattern. We wait for the shift change in 3 minutes, then move." The plan went smoothly at first. They slipped into the server room during the brief window when both technicians were logging out of their systems. Laetus moved to a terminal while Corsa stood guard, alien senses alert for any approach. "I need 5 minutes," Laetus murmured, fingers flying over the interface. "These encryptions are—" "Someone's coming," Corsa hissed. Earlier than expected, Laetus didn't look up. "Delay them." Without hesitation, Corsa moved to intercept, slipping into the shadows near the door. When the technician entered, the Abrethian struck with silent efficiency, a pressure point technique that left the human unconscious but unharmed. 2 minutes, Laetus updated, sweat beading on his forehead as he navigated the complex security protocols. That's when the alarm triggered, not from their presence, but from an automated system check that detected the unauthorized access attempt. Red lights bathed the room, and steel shutters began descending over the exits. "Time to go," Corsa called, already moving to hold one of the shutters partially open through sheer strength, an impressive feat even for an Abrethian. Almost. Laetus had reached the crucial data, downloaded in seconds. "Got it. Move." They escaped the server room just as the security response team arrived, ducking into a ventilation shaft that Laetus had identified as their emergency exit. Crawling through the narrow space, they could hear the commotion below, orders being shouted, heavy boots on metal flooring. When they finally emerged on a service platform 6 levels down, both were breathing heavily from exertion and adrenaline. "Did you get what we needed?" Corsa asked, scanning their surroundings for threats. Laetus checked the data chip. Access codes, security protocols, and... He paused, eyes widening as he processed what else he was seeing. And something a lot more valuable. Project Synthesis. Looks like classified research data. He looked up at Corsa, expression grim. A joint venture between Corp SEC and the Oberth Defense Force. Corsa's expression darkened. "Show me." The data revealed a horror beyond what either had imagined. Project Synthesis was a genetic engineering program, using DNA from various Death World species, including humans and Abrethians, to create biological weapons. Test subjects included political prisoners from both worlds, experimentally altered to enhance aggression, physical strength, and pain tolerance while reducing empathy and independent thought. "They're creating perfect soldiers," Laetus said quietly. "Obedient killing machines with the survival traits of our species." "Abomination," Corsa hissed, golden eyes blazing with fury. "This violates every sacred law of my people. Life is to be tested by the world, not twisted by technology." As they processed the discovery, a new alert flashed on Laetus's wrist display. A message from Lud, compromised. "Don't return. They know. We need to move," Laetus said urgently. "If they found Lud, they'll be sweeping the entire district." The night had become a desperate game of cat and mouse. Security drones filled the sky, their searchlights sweeping the streets below. Patrols of Corp SEC enforcers moved in coordinated patterns, checking identifications and scanning faces. They found temporary shelter in an abandoned processing plant, the machinery long silent, but the structure still sound. As rain hammered the metal roof above, they huddled in the darkness, planning their next move. "The data," Corsa said finally. "It must be exposed." Laetus nodded. "Slowly. There's a communications hub in Sector 9. If we can upload this to the public networks, neither Corp SEC nor the ODF can bury it. They will try to stop us," Corsa stated. "With everything they have." "Probably," Laetus agreed. "But what choice do we have? Run forever? They'll find us eventually." He gestured to the data chip. "This is leverage. Our only chance." Outside, thunder crashed, nature's artillery complementing the human tension below. In the brief illumination from lightning, Laetus saw something in Corsa's expression he hadn't noticed before. Not just determination, but a deep, personal pain. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Corsa hesitated before answering. "The test subjects." The data mentioned Base Omega as the primary testing facility. The Abrethian's voice grew thick with emotion. "My sister was stationed there. Communications specialist. She disappeared 6 months ago. Official report claimed she died in a transport accident." Understanding dawned on Laetus. "You think she discovered the project?" "I think she became part of it," Corsa replied, voice raw with suppressed grief and rage. "The timing matches. She sent me a coded message before disappearing. One word, synthesis." The revelation changed everything. What had been a desperate bid for survival was now a mission. Personal for Corsa, but no less important for Laetus. He had his own ghost to appease, his own guilt to address. "Then we definitely need to make this public," Laetus said firmly. "For your sister, and for all the others they've used." They spent the next hours preparing, gathering what weapons they could from Laetus's emergency caches, studying the schematics of Sector 9, plotting entry points and escape routes. Throughout it all, a strange new dynamic developed between them, a partnership built on shared purpose and growing respect. "Why are you helping me?" Corsa asked suddenly, as they prepared to move out. "This isn't just about your survival anymore." Laetus considered the question, surprising himself with the honesty of his answer. "Because I've spent too long following orders without questioning. Too long looking away from atrocities because they were necessary, Maybe this is my chance to do something right. Corsa studied him for a long moment, then extended a hand in the human gesture of agreement. Then we fight together. To the end. Laetus took the offered hand, feeling the strength in that alien grip. To the end. Dawn was breaking over Kaora as they approached Sector 9, the forgotten industrial heart of the city, abandoned after the economic collapse, but still housing critical infrastructure. The communications hub was housed in a massive pre-collapse building, its upper levels crumbling, but its subterranean data centers still functional. They moved cautiously, using the debris and abandoned machinery as cover. No alarms had yet sounded, but both knew it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. The entrance they'd chosen was a maintenance shaft, rarely used, but still connected to the main systems. As Laetus worked to bypass the security lock, Corsa kept watch, energy pistol at the ready. "We have company," the Abrethian said quietly. "North perimeter. Military-grade transport." Laetus glanced up briefly. "ODF." "Yes." "And they brought hunters." Corsa's expression was grim. "We need to move faster." The lock finally yielded, and they slipped inside the maintenance tunnel, narrow, poorly lit, but their path to the communication core. They moved quickly now, aware that time was running out. The first resistance came in the form of automated security, sensor turrets that Laetus disabled with practiced efficiency. But as they descended deeper into the facility, the defenses became more serious. A squad of security drones intercepted them 3 levels down, sleek, deadly machines armed with stun weapons and restraint systems. Corsa moved with blinding speed, disabling 2 before they could fully activate, while Laetus hacked a third, turning its targeting systems against its companions. "They know we're here now," Laetus said as they pressed onward, leaving the destroyed drones behind. "We'll have human opposition next." He was right. At the next junction, they encountered a Corp SEC tactical team, 6 operatives in full combat gear. What followed was a brutal, close-quarters firefight. Laetus and Corsa fought with perfect coordination, as if they had trained together for years rather than met days ago. Corsa took a grazing shot to the shoulder, but kept moving, the Abrethians' natural resilience allowing them to push through pain that would have incapacitated a human. Laetus provided covering fire, his marksmanship dropping 2 operatives before they could flank their position. When it was over, the corridor was silent except for their heavy breathing and the distant wail of alarms. They had won this skirmish, but both knew the real battle was still ahead. "The communication core is 2 levels down," Laetus said, checking his weapon's charge. "Once we're in, I'll need 3 minutes to upload the data and bypass the censorship filters." Corsa nodded, pressing a hand against the wounded shoulder. "I will give you those minutes." The next level brought more resistance. Automated turrets and another squad of operatives, these ones better prepared. They were forced to retreat, finding an alternate route through maintenance tunnels filled with dust and forgotten equipment. "Laetus," Corsa said suddenly, as they paused to catch their breath in a service alcove. "If I don't make it." "Don't," Laetus interrupted. "We both make it, or neither does." The Abrethian fixed him with that golden gaze. "This is not Obrith or Earth. Reality doesn't bend to will alone." "Maybe not," Laetus conceded, "but I'm not leaving you behind." Something shifted in Corsa's expression, surprise, followed by a deeper emotion that transcended species differences. Without warning, the Abrethian leaned forward and pressed their foreheads together in what Laetus recognized as a gesture of profound respect in Abrethian culture. "Then let us face reality together," Corsa said softly. The moment was interrupted by the sound of boots on metal, reinforcements arriving. They moved again, fighting their way meter by meter toward the communication core. When they finally reached it, both were wounded. Corsa's shoulder injury had worsened, and Laetus had sustained a deep cut along his ribs from a vibroblade. But the core itself was undefended, a massive room filled with servers and broadcast equipment, humming with power. "Cover the door," Laetus said, moving to the main terminal. "This won't take long." As he worked to upload the data, breaking through firewalls and security protocols, Corsa secured their position, using debris to create a barricade. Outside, they could hear the approaching forces, heavy boots, orders being shouted. 1 minute, Laetus called, fingers flying over the interface. The first assault came moments later, a breaching charge that partially destroyed their barricade. Corsa met the attackers with ferocious determination, using both the energy pistol and bare hands when necessary. Laetus continued working, even as stray shots impacted around him. 30 seconds. The next wave brought something new, an Abrethian in military uniform, leading a squad of what appeared to be enhanced soldiers. Their movements were too perfect, their coordination unnatural. Commander Vax, Corsa hissed, recognizing the officer. He leads the synthesis program. Vax stepped forward, his squad holding fire temporarily. Specialist Corsa, your defection has caused considerable inconvenience. Surrender now, and your death will be quick. Upload complete. Laetus called. It's broadcasting to every public channel in the system. Vax's expression twisted with rage. Kill them both. What followed was chaos, gunfire, energy blasts, the crash of equipment as the battle destroyed the delicate machinery of the communication core. Corsa and Laetus fought back to back, each protecting the other, moving as one deadly unit forged in the crucible of shared danger. A blast caught Corsa in the leg, shattering bone. The Abrethian stumbled, but remained upright through sheer will, still firing with deadly accuracy. Laetus saw his companion falter and made a split-second decision, throwing himself into the path of a second shot meant for Corsa's head. The impact threw him backwards, pain blossoming across his chest. He felt Corsa's powerful arms catch him before he hit the ground. Foolish human, the Abrethian growled, dragging him behind the remains of a server bank. Why would you do that? Laetus coughed, tasting blood. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Around them, the battle paused momentarily as Commander Vax signaled his troops to hold position. You're surrounded, he called. The data means nothing. We've already locked down the transmission. Too late, Laetus managed, his voice weak but triumphant. Check your feeds. It's everywhere. Vax's wrist communicator chirped urgently. His face contorted with rage as he received confirmation. Kill them. No prisoners. The enhanced soldiers moved forward with mechanical precision, but Corsa was ready. With a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building, the Abrethian charged, moving with impossible speed despite the injured leg. The first soldier fell with his neck snapped, the second with Corsa's energy pistol discharge burning through his chest. Laetus forced himself upright, ignoring the screaming pain in his chest. His weapon was lost, but he had one last trick, a remote detonator for the charges they'd placed on their way in. Security protocol. Always have an exit strategy. Corsa, he shouted. The west wall. Now, understanding flashed in those golden eyes. Corsa grabbed Laetus around the waist and lunged for the indicated wall, just as Laetus triggered the detonator. The explosion ripped through the chamber, collapsing part of the ceiling onto Vax and his soldiers. The blast propelled them through the newly created opening, tumbling down a debris-filled slope into a lower-level utility corridor. Pain lanced through Laetus's body with each impact, and he could hear Corsa's harsh breathing, interspersed with grunts of pain. When they finally came to rest, both were barely conscious. The sounds of pursuit seemed distant, muffled by the collapsed structure between them and their hunters. Still alive, Laetus whispered, his vision blurring at the edges. Unfortunately, Corsa replied, the usual stoic tone now threaded with pain. Though I believe my leg is no longer properly attached. Laetus attempted to sit up, nearly blacking out from the effort. Through the haze of pain, he assessed their situation. They were in an old maintenance tunnel, dimly lit by emergency lighting. Behind them, the sounds of digging indicated their pursuers hadn't given up. We need to keep moving, he said, though the words seemed absurd given their condition. Corsa made a sound that might have been a laugh. Always the optimist. With excruciating effort, they helped each other to their feet, Laetus supporting Corsa's weight as the Abrethian's shattered leg dragged uselessly. Step by agonizing step, they moved deeper into the tunnel system, leaving a trail of mingled blood, human red and Abrethian purple. Data's out, Laetus said between labored breaths. Mission accomplished. Not yet, Corsa replied grimly. As long as Vax lives, the project continues. Underground, hidden deeper, they reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Laetus's tactical instincts, dulled by pain and blood loss, still functioned enough to choose the path less likely to be monitored. They stumbled onwards, each step a testament to the survival instincts honed on their respective death worlds. In my culture, Corsa said suddenly, voice tight with pain, when 2 warriors face death together, they become more than comrades. Laetus felt something warm bloom in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. Earth has similar concepts. Battle brothers. Forged in fire. Yes, Corsa whispered. Forged in fire. They continued in silence, conserving strength, until they reached a sealed door, ancient, pre-collapse technology. Laetus examined the control panel, his blood-smeared fingers leaving crimson streaks across the surface. Emergency shelter, he said. If I can get it open, we might find medical supplies. Maybe communications. As he worked on the door, Corsa kept watch, the Abrethians' heightened senses alert despite the injuries. They're coming. Different route, but approaching. Laetus redoubled his efforts, bypassing security protocols designed to withstand catastrophes, but not the determined hands of a special tactics veteran. With a groan of protesting metal, the door finally slid open, revealing a small emergency command center, dusty but intact. They sealed themselves inside, just as the first sounds of pursuit reached their position. Corsa collapsed onto the floor, while Laetus searched the facility, finding basic medical supplies and, miraculously, a functioning communications terminal. Jackpot, he murmured, applying emergency sealant to his chest wound before turning his attention to Corsa's leg. The injury was catastrophic, bone fragments protruding through blue-green skin, muscle tissue shredded. Laetus did what he could with the limited supplies, knowing it wasn't enough. Leave it, Corsa said, watching his efforts with pain-glazed eyes. The terminal. Can you broadcast? Laetus nodded. Local only, but enough to reach underground networks. He moved to the terminal, bringing ancient systems to life. What's your plan? Not a plan. A tribute. Corsa's voice had grown weaker. For my sister. For your comrades. For all they've taken. Understanding, Laetus began recording, capturing Corsa's testimony, the details of project synthesis, the names of those responsible, the locations of facilities. When the Abrethian finished, Laetus added his own account. The missions he'd carried out unknowingly for the project, the evidence Dr. Karras had shown him, the connections between Earth's corporate elite and Oberth's military leadership. Outside, their pursuers had reached the door and were attempting to breach it. The ancient barrier shuddered with each impact, dust showering from the ceiling. Its scent, Laetus said finally, watching confirmation flash across the screen. Every underground channel, every independent news feed. Even if they shut down 90%, some will get through. Corsa nodded, satisfaction evident despite the pain. Then we have succeeded. The door shuddered again, the seal beginning to fail. Laetus retrieved his last weapon, a small holdout pistol with 2 charges remaining. He positioned himself beside Corsa, back against the wall, facing the door. Not how I pictured my last stand, he admitted, a strange calm settling over him. Corsa's hand found his, the Abrethian's grip still strong despite everything. There are worse ways to die than fighting beside a worthy ally. True. Laetus squeezed the alien hand, finding comfort in the contact. Though I was starting to think we might be more than just allies. The ghost of a smile touched Corsa's lips. Perhaps in another life. The door gave way with a screech of tearing metal. Smoke filled the opening, followed by the silhouettes of soldiers. Laetus raised his weapon, prepared for the end. But the expected assault never came. Instead, a voice crackled over a loudspeaker. Commander Vax, stand down by order of the Galactic Oversight Committee. Project Synthesis has been exposed. Repeat, stand down. Through the smoke, they could see confusion among the troops. Some lowered their weapons, while others looked to Vax for guidance. The commander's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. Lies, he shouted. Finish the mission. Kill the traitors. But his enhanced soldiers hesitated, their programming conflicting with new authority directives flooding their systems. In that moment of hesitation, something remarkable happened. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Vax, seeing his control slipping away, drew his own sidearm and aimed it at Corsa. If they won't do it, I'll finish you myself, deserter. Laetus fired his holdout pistol in the same instant that Vax pulled his trigger. Both shots found their marks. Vax crumpled to the ground with a neat hole between his eyes. Laetus felt fire blossom in his shoulder as Vax's shot grazed him instead of hitting Corsa. Silence fell. The remaining soldiers backed away, some dropping their weapons entirely as orbital authority signals overrode their command protocols. Emergency medical teams pushed through, responding to the Oversight Committee's intervention. As medics swarmed around them, Laetus felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing he saw was Corsa's face, those alien features somehow more familiar to him now than his own reflection. We did it, he whispered before darkness claimed him. The aftermath unfolded like scenes from a damaged hollow recording, fragmented, disjointed, interspersed with periods of darkness. Laetus remembered the antiseptic smell of a medical facility, voices speaking in urgent tones, the sensation of regenerative compounds knitting his flesh back together. When he finally regained full consciousness, he found himself in a private recovery room. The view outside his window, revealing the upper levels of Keora, the clean, gleaming spires so different from the underworld he'd inhabited. A doctor, fully human, no corporate insignia, explained the situation. The expose had created a political earthquake. Both Earth Alliance and Oberth authorities were scrambling to distance themselves from Project Synthesis. Corporate executives and military officials were being arrested. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Oversight Committee had been convened. And Corsa? Laetus asked, his voice rough from disuse. The doctor's expression softened. Recovering. The leg was beyond saving. They've fitted a cybernetic replacement. But Abrethians are resilient. Your friend will survive. Friend. The word seemed inadequate for what they had become. It was 3 days before Laetus was allowed to see Corsa. They met in a secure garden atrium within the medical facility, under the watchful eyes of Oversight Committee security, protection, not imprisonment. The Abrethian sat beside a small fountain, golden eyes tracking Laetus's approach. Despite the new cybernetic leg, sleek, advanced technology that integrated seamlessly with blue-green flesh, Corsa still moved with innate grace, rising to greet him. For a moment, neither spoke. What words could possibly encompass what they had experienced together? In the end, it was Corsa who broke the silence. They found my sister, the Abrethian said quietly. Alive. One of their test subjects, but her mind intact. She is recovering. Good, Laetus replied, genuinely relieved. That's good. Another silence, more comfortable than the first. What will you do now? Corsa asked finally. Your name has been cleared. The evidence proved you were a whistleblower, not a criminal. Laetus hadn't considered the future. For so long, survival had been his only goal. I don't know. Not Corp SEC, that's certain. Maybe independent security work. He looked up at the Abrethian. What about you? The Oversight Committee has offered me asylum. Political refugee status. Corsa's expression became thoughtful. They've also suggested I might be valuable as a consultant on ethics in military operations. Sounds bureaucratic, Laetus observed with a small smile. Painfully so, Corsa agreed, returning the smile, an expression that transformed those alien features into something unexpectedly warm. But perhaps necessary. Someone must ensure this never happens again. The fountain burbled softly between them, a counterpoint to the distant sounds of the city. Above, the perpetual smog had thinned slightly, allowing glimpses of actual sky, a rare sight in Keora. We could work together, Laetus suggested suddenly. Independent contractors. With our backgrounds, we'd be formidable. Corsus studied him, those golden eyes unreadable. You would partner with an Abrethian? Voluntarily? I'd partner with you, Laetus corrected. Species seems irrelevant after what we've been through. Something shifted in Corsus's expression, surprise giving way to consideration, and then to something deeper. There would be challenges, cultural differences, biological incompatibilities. True, Laetus acknowledged, but we're both survivors, adaptable, and we work well together. Also true, Corsa extended a hand, the human gesture they had shared before. Partners, then. Laetus took the offered hand, but instead of simply shaking it, he pulled the Abrethian closer, pressing their foreheads together in the traditional greeting of Corsa's people. Partners. The debriefings and hearings lasted for weeks. Representatives from a dozen worlds questioned them about project synthesis, recording every detail for criminal proceedings against those responsible. Throughout it all, they remained united, their testimony unshakable. On the final day, as they stood before the Oversight Committee for the last time, an Earth Alliance admiral, one of the few untouched by the scandal, approached them privately. I wanted to thank you both, she said quietly. What you exposed, it would have changed the balance of power throughout the galaxy, created weapons that could never be controlled. She hesitated. Many of my colleagues are less grateful. You've made powerful enemies, even with the protections the committee has granted you. We're aware of the risks, Laetus replied. We come from death worlds, Admiral, Corsa added. Danger is our natural habitat. The Admiral studied them with newfound respect. Indeed. Well, should either of you ever require assistance within my sphere of influence, you need only ask. She handed them a secure communication chip before departing. Later, as the sun set over Kora's skyline, they stood on the balcony of their new quarters, a secure facility provided by the committee until more permanent arrangements could be made. What's next? Laetus asked, watching the play of light across the city's towers. Corsa's gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, where the first stars were becoming visible. We've struck a blow against those who would exploit our kinds, but there will be others. Similar projects, different names. Then we keep fighting, Laetus said simply. Yes. Corsa turned to face him, expression resolute yet somehow peaceful. We keep fighting. Together. The Abrethian extended a hand, palm up. Not the human handshake this time, but an offering. After a moment's hesitation, Laetus placed his hand in Corsa's, feeling the strength and warmth in that alien touch. From this day forward, Corsa said softly, we are bound by choice, not circumstance. Where you go, I follow. Where I lead, you accompany. A warrior's oath? Laetus asked. Something older, Corsa replied. A promise between equals who have seen death together and chosen life instead. In the gathering darkness, their silhouettes merged into a single shadow against the cityscape. Two beings from worlds so harsh they were classified as death worlds, now united by something stronger than the forces that had tried to destroy them. Together then, Laetus said, sealing the promise. Until the end. The news feeds would later report on the curious partnership, a human and an Abrethian forming an independent security and investigation firm specializing in corporate ethics violations and military oversight. They would become legendary in certain circles, feared in others. But in that moment, standing above a city still reeling from the truths they had exposed, they were simply two survivors who had found in each other something worth protecting, a bond forged in the crucible of shared struggle, tempered by respect and strengthened by the understanding that sometimes, when two Death World species meet, neither must bow to the other. Instead, they stand together, and the rest of the galaxy bows to them.